I'm making this video to discuss why neurobiological explanations of addiction are potentially problematic. Neurobiological explanations of addiction are reductionistic. Neurobiological explanations of addiction potentially lead to a focus on neurobiological solutions to addiction. According to psychiatrist Thomas Szasz, if my memory serves me, according to Szasz, the degree to which one has difficulty stopping using a substance is related to the reasons one has for using the substance. I wish I could tell you the exact quote, so this is my general understanding of the Szaszian idea related to addiction. For example, one may use an illicit drug to cope with negative emotions. One may use an illicit substance to escape negative feelings. One may have anxiety and use an illicit substance to cope with the anxiety or worry or stress. So, worry, anxiety, stress, or misery can all be caused by problems in living. Perhaps one has not done well economically and one is distressed about their finances. Perhaps one has poor relationships with family or friends or just peers in general. Perhaps one is very self-conscious or has low self-esteem and they're using illicit substances to feel better about themselves or escape their feelings of failure about anything. And in one sense, yes, we do have brains that are neurological and biological and have neurons and neurotransmitters. However, the real-world events related to worry or stress or feelings of failure or inadequacy or just bad feelings in general are, in general, related to problems in living. Social relationships, relationships with careers and jobs. So the more one has unresolved problems that are causing distress, again, problems in living contributing to distress, the more problems one has. And if one is using an illicit substance to avoid those problems or escape bad feelings or stress or worry related to those problems, those real-world events related to relationships with peers, friends, family, bosses, coworkers, so on and so forth. The more one relies on an illicit substance to escape those feelings or problems, the greater difficulty one will have stopping an illicit substance, or a substance like alcohol or cigarettes, nicotine or alcohol. It is my understanding that there are drugs, like there's one for alcohol, I believe, that when one drinks alcohol, it will cause one to start vomiting when they're on this prescribed quote-unquote medication. Now that can be a very forceful way to deter someone from drinking, and I've not read the studies exactly to know how effective it is. Perhaps it is rather effective. Or if one binge eats food, there's groups like Overeaters Anonymous. One could almost consider food a sort of a drug if one is, eating their feelings away. If one starts feeling bad and they start binge eating because just the simple act of eating sugar or fats causes some good emotions in some way. And yes, food can be quite enjoyable to eat. Just like those that binge drink alcohol or, use heroin might like the feeling that they get from that. Or in cases of heroin, part of the quote-unquote addiction is when they start not using heroin, they start getting sick, so that they may get to a point where they are simply using heroin to avoid the withdrawals. And that is another potential aspect of addiction. Or with benzodiazepines, one may have a habit of using benzodiazepines, and if they stop suddenly, they could get a seizure and die from a seizure from a severe benzodiazepine withdrawal. So in that sense, neurobiological understanding can be helpful. Instead of stopping alcohol very suddenly or benzodiazepines extremely suddenly, it is safer to slowly go off the drug. And I believe psychiatrist Joanna Moncrief has stated in general that psychiatric drugs can be thought of sort of like recreational substances in certain ways, like all psychiatric drugs. I believe I saw a video of psychiatrist Joanna Moncrief talking about how even with neuroleptics, which most individuals on neuroleptics, it is my understanding, do not like being on neuroleptics, maybe 50 to 70%, and there's often a good amount of resistance to staying on or going on to various neuroleptics, and it's often there's often coercion involved and non-consensual psychiatry when individuals are put on neuroleptic drugs, aka the marketing term antipsychotic drugs. Regardless, according to Joanna Moncrief, the psychiatrist, some individuals like antipsychotic drugs, aka neuroleptics, which I believe is likely believable. Some people find them helpful or like them, but it's still not that much different than, heroin or cocaine, so on and so forth, except this generally, sort of like how there's some foods most people don't like, but then like some people like really like certain foods and others be like, why does that person like that food? Sort of like that a little bit. So yes, there are aspects of substance use that do relate to neurobiology. However, the whole point of me making this is to note that focusing on neurobiological explanations of addiction can be problematic. It can lead to an overfocus of neurobiological solutions to addiction, which, in my view, if they don't address the underlying reasons for individuals using a substance, then they will likely fail. And maybe they will be successful for some individuals, but my guess is it's probably no more than a third of the population, maybe less, quite likely less. And that's just my general guesstimate based on anecdotal information, so on and so forth. And yes, there are things like Suboxone and naltrexone and methadone. And my general understanding is those are a harm reduction approach. So instead of injecting heroin, one could be on Suboxone or methadone and hopefully slowly go off the Suboxone or methadone over time. There is a paper that's out about hyperbolic tapering related to neuroleptic drugs, so that can often be helpful. And I'm not saying that neurobiological aspects of addiction shouldn't be studied or understood, because in one sense there are neurological, biological aspects of substance use problems, because it relates to the brain and body, whether it be opioids or methamphetamines or Adderall abuse or benzodiazepines, Xanax abuse, so on and so forth. And there are safe ways to get off drugs and there are not safe ways to get off drugs. Regardless, overly focusing on that, and I'm almost done here, is problematic in my view. Since, as Thomas Szaszian noted, the degree of difficulty one has stopping a substance relates to the reasons why one is using a substance, and therefore, being moral agents and moral creatures, if we have a greater focus on the reasons one uses substances, whether it's economic problems or social problems, so on and so forth, if those economic problems or housing problems or social problems are not addressed, that can be problematic. So I suppose this is just food for thought. You are entitled to your own views and opinions. I've stated my general understanding, and this is for general information purposes only. Read books by Thomas Szaszian. Limitless peace.